Let's take a look now at the three basic ways to write loops in Java. First is a while loop, then a do-while loop, and then the for loop. A while loop is really the simplest way to write a loop. Right? It allows you just to repeatedly execute some statement as long as the condition is true. The while loop is structured so the condition is checked at the start of the loop. So basically we use the while keyword, we have our condition, and then we have the statement we want to repeatedly execute. Now because the condition is checked at the start of the loop, it's possible that the statement never executes. All right, let's look at an example. Let's write a simple bit of code that we'll use to do a factorial function. Right? Factorial is just you multiply a number times each number below it. Right? So 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, that sort of thing. So we set it up with our while, and we want to say that our value, kval, is greater than 1. Right? So kval starts out at 5, and we're going to keep inside this loop as long as kval is greater than 1. We then say our factorial is equal to itself times kval. Right? So the first time into this loop, right, factorial is 1, kval is 5, so factorial becomes 5, right? 5 times 1. Then we reduce kval by 1, kval minus equals 1, making kval 4 now. Right? It goes back up to the while statement. So now it checks 4 is greater than 1. We do the factorial times kval, so now that's 5 times 4 is 20. Kval becomes 3. We go back to the loop, right? 3 is still greater than 1. Factorial is 20 times 3, which is 60. Right? Kval becomes 2. 2 is still greater than 1. Factorial then is 60 times 2, 120. Kval now decrements down to 1. When we check our while loop, 1 is not greater than 1, so it falls through, and then it would print out the value 120. Notice we're using a block statement here in our while loop, because the while loop itself will only execute one statement unless you put it in a block. To kind of give an example of that, there's a way we can actually write this same code to do the work without using a block statement. Right? If we set this up, right, again, kval is equal to 5, factorial is 1. We do our loop, kval greater than 1, and then the statement we execute is simply factorial times equals kval minus minus, the decrement operator. In this case, we're now performing the exact same work, but we didn't have to use a block statement, because now we can just go ahead and print it out. So we'll repeatedly execute that factorial times equals kval minus minus until kval gets down to 1. Another form of loop is a do-while loop. Now, the do-while loop repeatedly executes a statement as long as the condition is true, but unlike the while loop, it checks the condition at the end of the loop. So we look at the layout for it. We have the do keyword, the statement we want to execute, the while keyword, and then the condition. Now, because it checks the condition at the end of the loop, the body of the do while always executes at least once. So I see some code here. If I set this up and I have some integer value, ival set to 5, I put my do in place. Now I'm going to execute multiple statements, so I'm going to set up a block. Then inside of here, I'm going to go ahead and print out ival. You'll notice now, most of the time up until now, we've called print line, print ln. In this case, we call it just print. And what that does is when we print the value out, it prints it and doesn't go to a new line. Right? So now if I print out after that, *2 equals, it will actually put that on the same line. So now I go ahead and calculate ival times equals 2, which now makes ival 10. When I print line that, now I get 10 displayed, and the next thing I print will be on a new line. So I go ahead and close my loop here. And now I can just kind of walk through this loop over and over again. The last thing I need to do, of course, is include the condition. So I'm going to stay in this loop as long as ival is less than 100. So we know currently ival is 10. So next pass through the loop, it's going to print out 10 times 2 equals 20. So ival is now 20, still less than 100. 20 times 2 is 40. 40 is still less than 100. 40 times 2 is 80. 80 is still less than 100. And now 80 times 2 equals 160. But now ival is now not less than 100. It's greater than 100. 160, so our code ends. Now the key difference here from the while loop is that it will always execute at least once. Right? So if I initialize ival instead of being 5 to be something like 150, right, it will still go through the loop one time, printing out 150 times 2 equals 300. The last of the basic loops we're going to look at here is the for loop. Just like the others, it repeatedly executes a statement as long as the condition is true, and condition is checked at the start of the loop, right? Very much like the while loop. And really what it is the for loop is more of a convenience layout for a while loop. Let's look at a very common while loop behavior. If we want to set up a while loop, the first thing we do is initialize some value. In this case, it's ival. And then that while loop, we would check a condition, in this case, ival less than 100. We would then do some work inside that loop, like print something out. And then we would update our loop control variable. Right? We would actually, in this case, times equals 2. Right? Well, that's something we do very, very frequently. So the for loop provides a simplified notation for this scenario. We use the for loop, we use the for keyword. Then within the parentheses, we initialize things. We have our condition for being in the loop, and we have a place to update the loop control. And then, of course, that executes our statement. So to see that, an example of that, we start out with our for keyword in the parentheses. We do the initialization, ival equals 1. We have our condition, ival less than 100. Notice that each of these sections are separated by a semicolon. And then we have our update, ival times equals 2. And then in the body of the loop, we print out ival. Right? So this while loop and the for loop both do the exact same thing. Right? The for loop just makes that standard behavior of initialization, condition, and update a bit more simplified. Just as all the loops, if you want to actually execute multiple statements, you can put it in a block. Right? So just here for notation, we could have an opening bracket and a closing bracket, and we can put as many statements inside there as we need to.